Last year, my life changed forever. I was diagnosed with a form of type 1 diabetes. It means my body can't produce enough of the hormone insulin, which controls the levels of glucose in my blood. I now need to monitor my blood sugar levels every day and inject myself with insulin to balance things out. It's been much harder to cope with than I ever imagined. The illness has created new pressures for me and my wife Rachel that no one warned us about.
I think it's those moments where your sugars are either they're like spiking or you're going low or they've been really up and down. That sort of affects your personality. That took me by surprise, really.
The only way I can describe it is it's like an incredible adrenaline rush that you just can't control, or this intense anger that overcomes you because your body is getting ready for something to happen. No one explains to you how blood sugar affects the brain. It was really hard at the beginning because we didn't know what that was. And I think some of that is probably coming to terms with the diagnosis and grieving the life that you had.
That sort of almost like denial stage that we both went through. And then it was like, oh no, actually this is real and it's for life.
And it's really big.
When I was diagnosed, I wasn't offered any psychological support to help me cope with my new life. And that's true for most people with diabetes in Wales. Christopher Owen from Llangollen was diagnosed with type 1 when he was 12. As a teenager, he struggled to cope with the demands diabetes placed on him at a time when he was already feeling vulnerable.
I was going through GCSEs, I was receiving family loss, and I was finding out about my sexuality, coming out as gay and things, so it kind of all just happened at once. You feel like you have to go through it alone. You're not really taught about how to deal with the emotional impact. It got to a point where I stopped engaging with my diabetes team. I'd near enough given up. I wanted to ignore it.
But that state of mind put his life in danger. On several occasions, he was rushed into A&E with diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA, a life-threatening condition when the body runs out of insulin.
The doctor came back with my mum and my sister with me and said I was about half an hour away from cardiac arrest. I kind of panned over to my sister, and the horror in her face, that is the turning point for me.
Soon after, Chris was introduced to a clinical psychologist, Dr. Rose Stewart. She works exclusively with people with diabetes after running a pioneering pilot project in Wrexham.
People with diabetes have a really high rate of emergency admissions, and we thought that psychological support, particularly for young people, could be a way that we could reduce that. If people just aren't feeling in a good place psychologically, the demands of living with diabetes feels too much, and so they'll often reduce the frequency of checking their blood glucose, or they'll just start guessing their insulin doses or avoiding taking their insulin, and that makes people really poorly really quickly.
Dr. Stewart sits in with doctors and nurses when young people come for diabetes appointments. They're able to spot distress really quickly. Over the 2-year pilot project, emergency admissions for young adults dropped by 40%. But despite its success, Dr. Stewart is the only psychologist in Wales working full-time with young adults with diabetes.
The level of psychological support for people with diabetes is lamentable. The pandemic, it made a bad situation worse. The bottom line is people have been highlighted as being at extra risk if they have a long-term condition like diabetes. So of course, the amount of fear that's gone through the diabetes community, most people are just frightened is the bottom line. They need support now more than ever. I just wish that the Welsh Government and the health boards, for that matter, would deliver what they said they were going to deliver in their diabetes delivery plan.
The Welsh Government says it's working to improve access to psychological support, including training diabetes staff to support patients better, with specific programmes for young people and young adults. It says it will help identify those in greatest need, who can then be referred to clinical psychology services. I first met Chris Owen and Dr. Rose Stewart back in January, a couple of months before lockdown began.
Chris, hey!
So much has changed since then, and I wanted to find out how they've been affected.
The day job has continued. We've had obviously lots of our young adults who've been really affected by the economic impact of COVID. So I've been doing lots of work online, lots of webinars and setting up online support groups on Twitter. So yeah, the way that we work has really radically shifted over the last few months, and it's really put us into the spotlight in diabetes care.
Diabetes is relentless, whether it's feeling unwell with high blood sugars or the fear of low blood sugars and hypos. Adding COVID-19 into the mix really does increase anxiety. And I believe that for people with long-term health conditions, caring for people's minds is a really great way of caring for their bodies.